Broadcast, and I remind all those present that the words and actions will be broadcast to a wider audience, and certain conduct is unacceptable and will not be tolerated. Should any person not wish to be recorded, I advise that they should leave the meeting room prior to any statements being made. Any defamatory statements made are not the position of the Council and remain an individual's opinion. The Council accepts no responsibility for any defamatory statements, and all liability remains with the person making the remarks. And secondly, an acknowledgement to country. I'd like to acknowledge the Kamilaroi people who are the traditional custodians of this land. I'd also like to pay respect to elders past and present and extend that respect to other Aboriginal people here this evening. And our meeting prayer, if we could rise please. Almighty God, we humbly beseech Thee to vouchsafe Thy blessing upon this council, direct and prosper our deliberations and to the advancement of Thy glory and the true welfare of the people of the Regional Council and Australia. Amen. Amen. So councillors, now I'd like to formally open the meeting, and the first item on the agenda is apologies and leave of absence, and as we are all in attendance and we have no leave of absence requests, we'll move to item 2, community consultation, and we have no members of the community to consult with us on matters in the business paper this evening. That brings us to item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Move Councillor Betts and Councillor Rebbe, thank you. Any matters arising from those minutes? Councillor Tickle.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Item 8.4, I have a non-pecuniary less than significant...
Oh no, we're not quite to... This is the previous minutes we're dealing with at the moment.
I'm jumping ahead.
Don't mind. So, councillors, if we have no matters arising, could I put them, a motion to... We've done that.
Accept the minutes.
Item 4, disclosures of interest. Councillor Tickle, sorry.
Thank you. Item 8.4, I'm a member of the Rotary Public Tamworth First Light, so I'm declaring a non-pecuniary interest as less significance, and I will be remaining in the list.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Councillor Rebbe?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, this one's a very minor one, but at 12.1, a less than significant non-pecuniary interest. It's in closed council. The outcome of that may provide some slight advantage to some of my students at school in my role as a career trainer.
12.1 is it?
Sorry, yeah, 12.1, is that what I said?
Yes.
Yep, 12.1, yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And no other declarations, thank you. And we have no mayoral minute this evening. That will bring us to notice of motion, item 6.1, notice of motion from Councillor Inglis. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Webb, thank you. Councillor Inglis, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. No, I think the notice of motion sort of explains what it's about, and the recommendation's fairly clear. You and I have been speaking about this for quite a few months, and we agreed that we probably should do this, so that was presented under that sort of light. One thing that was interesting, Mr Mayor, in writing it, of course, was that when you look at that, that list is, maybe not even complete. There may well be other things. But in front of you, I was thinking about it today, actually, basically the social history and development of the festival, isn't it? Because some of those things go back 50 years, and then it's just been that accumulation of those assets basically over the last 49 years. And the other thing that I thought about today was the fact that the amount of people that would have been involved in those things, in getting those things and making those things happen over the last 50 years. And it just struck me today, Mr Mayor, for something for you to just think about, and that is that because it is our 50th celebration next year, and in view of what I was just talking about, it would just seem appropriate, if possible, that at our 50th we have some sort of specific celebration around that and try and recognise the very people that made that happen. And you would know many of them, and I'm sure Mr. Harley would, know many of them. And it just, I don't know, it just seems it'll be a good thing to do. Maybe even, Mr. Mayor, I sort of feel a song coming on. But you could write maybe a song or a poem or something about that. But I just think you could turn that, Mr. Mayor, into some sort of it just seems fitting with the 50th sort of Goulburn Jubilee year, doesn't it? Because of what you got in front of you is the history of the festival as we know today. And behind all of that, there's a lot of people who did a lot of hard work and that creative contribution there. So.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to make comment? Councillor Rodda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Great recommendation for a suite of great assets, and obviously in recent times we've seen that tally of assets increase dramatically, particularly from the acquisitions from Rural Press and things like that. And I think this audit would place us in a good position for the next 50 years of country music festivals 51 years of country music festivals in Tamworth, and I think it's a great thing to do to protect our intellectual property, and it's great that we've got so much that we can call our own.
Thank you. Councillor Impey.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. As I read this the other night, it felt to me as if we were big kids and we're packing up our most favourite treasured toys safely, and we'll get them back out again next time the world wants to see them. And I think that's exactly what will happen. By about January next year, the world will want to celebrate 50 years with Tamworth, and I think this is a very, very well written and thought out notice of motion.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Wilson.
Mr. Mayor, it's a fabulous festival. It's a fabulous branding, and there has been a lot of interest in it being superseded by other places. We're well aware of that. And I can remember when CMA and Tamworth Council did a contract, and the very interesting thing right at the end of it, one was that the awards be held every year, but the phrase "in Tamworth" was left off, and that was actually quite an area of concern. And it's, to be honest, what prompted the building of TREC, because we realised to keep it in Tamworth, there needed to be a suitable location where it could be housed and shown. But there was fear then that it be taken to Sydney. So ensuring these other valuable assets and brandings and historic items remain here, as you said, social items, is just critical, and I think it's an excellent move.
Thank you. Any further comments, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Motion is carried. And item 6.2, Councillor Rodda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 6.2, notice of motion. I've got an amendment recommendation that notice of motion dealings with developers, transparency policy and digital register be received and noted, and further that the Director of Planning and Compliance facilitate councillor workshops to provide guidance on options to develop a policy framework that ensures public accountability and transparency of councillor and council staff interactions with developers and developer representatives. And if I had a seconder, I will speak to it.
Councillor Impey, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was interested to read a story in the monthly magazine of last month, February 2021, about the former mayor of Ipswich, Paul Pasali. And it started off by saying, when four-time Mayor Paul Pasali was jailed for fraud and corruption, Mr. Ipswich left behind a fractured city ruled for the benefit of developers and mates. And I think that that's probably a cautionary tale for all local government areas around the whole country. Impartiality in decision making must not only exist but also be seen to exist, whether you are a resident, large or small developer, sole trader, builder or registered as a company, all of our stakeholders, businesses and partners need to have the confidence in our systems to know that when decisions are made, they are made in an open, transparent and accountable way. I believe our residents value fairness, transparency and accountability in council decisions. For a number of years, members of our community have asked me about decisions by council and staff under delegations. Sometimes I've been unable to answer their questions or concerns and to do so meant asking the GM or a director and tying up unnecessary time and resources to do so. I was also advised that when I inquired recently about an issue whether such a register of discussions existed, I was advised that nothing existed and that it would be virtually impossible to interrogate the entire email and diary system to get an answer promptly. Sometimes I've heard suggestions, whether true or false, that council favours a particular developer or contractor when it comes to decisions or when council resources are allocated. Governments at all levels cannot view themselves as unaccountable protected species, but I realise that our local government and other local government areas in New South Wales are already subject to many controls the other tiers of government are not. I don't want a system that is unnecessarily or excessively onerous on developers, staff or councillors. I don't want a system that stifles discussion about a building proposal, such as installing a new shed in the backyard by the property owner, and I'm sure we can agree to a system that provides balance and dispels the negative perceptions about favouritism while protecting the privacy of our stakeholders. Ultimately, I want our region to be considered one that is welcoming, accommodating and transparent with all significant developer interactions.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to make comment? Councillor Inglis?
Mr Mayor, yeah, I'll vote for the amended motion. I'll be upfront, I wouldn't have voted for the motion that originally stood because it was too definitive and we need to give this a lot of thought. It's an important area and it's an area that a lot of councils who have attempted to have policies in these areas, particularly in New South Wales, have struggled because it's trying to find the balance between, and Councillor Rodda spoke about that balance, that's the tricky bit, getting the balance between allowing the conversations to be had. I mean, you know, every time I play golf with a group of people that I haven't met before, you can guarantee I'll get a council question and it's usually got something to do with a granny flat or a subdivision. So you can't have situations where, you know, things like that have to be recorded because there's privacy and all the rest of it. And it's can be particularly tricky for mayor and general managers because they have a myriad of conversations that are asked to be confidential specifically very early on in lots of things. Someone just floating an idea, someone just throwing something out there to get a feel, the vibe for the, you know, for the council's attitude generally to things. You can't stifle that. To take that away and have a reputation that you can't do those things is not good. So that wording's great. It's saying let's have a look at it, let's see what options there are, let's workshop it and let's see if we can find that balance.
Thank you. Any further comments, councillors? Councillor Wilson?
Mr Mayor, we have to be really careful that in raising something like this, we're not creating the impression that this integrity and purpose and constructive discussion doesn't happen. Because by raising that, it can indicate that this is not normal. You know, we don't run a ship that it's full of integrity. We don't deal with potential opportunities with integrity. And I must admit I was absolutely concerned when I read that. When I read the initial proposal, notice of motion, I'm certainly pleased that it's been removed so that we can have a sensible discussion about it. Just imagine if innovative businessman wants to come to Tamworth, businesswoman wants to come to Tamworth and establish something, and you say, oh, well, you're going to have somebody sitting in here recording everything we do. What for? So it can be made available to the public. I tell you who will love that. Every other competitor, every other town, because any developer will leave the place as quickly as they can. And also it creates a parasitical situation where those with initiative and insight and prepared to take a risk are really laying the foundations for those who'll say, oh, we'll look in and see what's happening. I can do that too. So we don't want to take away initiative from our city. We don't want to put such stress on the staff that they're frightened to talk to anybody or frightened to have serious conversations about the potentials and the non-potentials. The difficulty with DAs when they come in, there are companies who are very meticulous about how their DAs are presented. And so when they get to the end point, there's very little discussion needs to take place. There are others that may be not so particular, not so pedantic about how they're presented. What does that do to that person when these discussions about how things are presented or not presented, which are really part of their business function, become the property of everybody in town, out of country, out of state? So I agree with the workshop, that makes sense. But we need to be very careful that we don't cripple the function of our organisation into becoming so pedantic that we squeeze out in initiative and the vibe that we've got now. We need to be really careful how we work this.
Thank you. Councillor Tickle.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I guess I should have come up earlier and spoken against the motion. I'm not totally in favour of this at all. I believe that we are transparent already and just a register. Why do we need all of this? So we're just going to create another level of bureaucracy. We're so over-regulated now in councils. You hear that every day of the week. How about we have a motion to free up the bureaucracy that we've got and that we've all got to operate under? I don't want to frighten developers. Why do their large or be their small? We welcome business investment in this community. We have for generations, and developers have got confidence here. And I'm not just talking large developers, I'm talking people like ourselves who might want to do something. Why has it all got to be unregistered, for heaven's sake? We're going to have to employ another one or two people just to administer this. Trying to get money to green Tamworth for more trees. I'd rather that. I don't want more bureaucrats. I'm sure none of us want more bureaucracy. So why do this? Why do we want to frighten off potential developers that are sitting out there already? We've quoted Ipswich. How about we quote all the other hundreds of councils that have got positive stories to tell? And I believe that Tamworth is one of those. You'll always find someone who says, oh, I didn't know about it, or else. I move around this community and I have for 36 years, and I only want to hear positive things. I rarely hear grumbles, and if I do, sometimes founded, sometimes completely unfounded. And I'm not going to support this at all because I don't believe that we need it. I believe that we are transparent, we are accountable, we've got a strong council, we've got a strong community, we've got strong members of staff that oversee all of this, and I see absolutely no need for it at all.
Thank you. Councillor B.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Well, as far as I'm aware, we haven't actually made a decision to develop a digital register at this stage. I think we are going to be workshopping it and further discussions will be had. Look, I'm a first-time councillor and I've enjoyed the last 4 years and I will enjoy the next 6 months or so, and then hopefully beyond that. I learned very early on that for every development, and therefore every developer who comes in to want to develop something, there's an action and then there's a positive reaction or a negative reaction to that. So I'm suggesting if we have to develop a register for those who want to develop and all the potentially changeable actions that happen in our community, do we need to also develop a register for those people, and we do have somewhat of that now, for those people who decide not to agree with that, and obviously they can write a letter to council, and those letters are part of a report that is put to council and is considered in that decision being made. So we need to be very careful, as Mead mentioned, not to go down a path of creating a heck of a lot of work, both in the positive and the negative angle for every single action that occurs that might be good or not bad or not good for our community. So I think a lot of discussion will have to be had.
Thank you. Any further discussion, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Right.
Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you. That brings us to item 8.1. Moved Councillor Rodder and seconded Councillor Maxwell, thank you. Councillor Rodder, do you wish to speak to the
No,
motion?
thank you, Mr Mayor.
Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to make comment? Councillor Impey.
Just a quick one, it just keeps getting more and more exciting. It's really, really pushing along.
Thank you, and I think this will help ease the process of our council in creating these very necessary adjustments as the development unfolds. Any further comments, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against, the motion is carried. Item 8.2.
Move.
Councillor Wilson and Councillor Impey, thanks. Councillor Wilson, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, Mayor.
Councillor Impey, do you wish, I beg your pardon, any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment?
Look, yeah, just a general one. After reading the report, based on what previously occurred last time this was done, I think it's 2012, and a lot of development, a lot of projects came as a result of that. So I'm really excited about what might come from this time round. We have a lot in Blueprint 100, as we know, and I'm really hopeful that following this modelling, a lot of what exists in Blueprint 100, particularly around the transport plans that we have, a rail infrastructure, ring roads and all sorts of other exciting plans will come to fruition over the next 5 to 10 years or so. I'm not sure what timeframes, but it's really exciting what may come from this.
Thank you. Any further comments, councillors? I'd just like to make a comment that I think this has been a hugely beneficial tool for us in the planning of our city. I think we're entitled to have a fair bit of confidence in the modelling that Transport for New South Wales has done in the past, and hopefully will continue into the future. So I think this is a good thing for us to be doing, and it's a good investment for the city. If we don't have any further comments, councillors, Councillor Impey.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I just thought of one thing. Just in relation to Transport for New South Wales and the modelling, where do they, I guess it's a question, where do they access their population growth data, which will obviously have a bearing on what sort of transport modelling might occur in the future, because the more we grow, the greater our need for transport infrastructure, because as we know, there are figures and there are figures, so I'm hopeful that they are using the appropriate figures.
Mr. Ash, do you have a comment?
That's really Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure. But the information that's put into the model is not just about population. It's about what's in the city in terms of attractors and generators, and and they do macro modelling and they do micro modelling. So the micro modelling looks at the actual intersections and the level of service of a lot of the intersections, and macro modelling looks at the actual route that someone might take from Kingswood through to McCarthy High School or something, and it just models multiple scenarios based on population growth, but the population growth is the information is provided from the planning department in terms of what'll Kallala look like, for example, when it's when all the land that's zoned there to be developed is fully developed, and that information's fed into the model and it just keeps processing it.
And that population growth will be from our planning department, not from the state planning department, because as we know, they think we're growing at, I think, 0.4%.
Thank you. Any further comments? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The motion is carried. And 8.3, and councillors, you'll be aware that there was an error in the initial report and the cricket fee waiver, and the report needed to state that the carnival will attract about 300 people and the economic benefit of about 232,000, not the 27,000 that it was this week. Move Councillor Webb and Councillor Rodder, thank you. Councillor Webb, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Just a quick couple of words. When I read that, I thought there's a lot more benefit than that involved in that, and there'll be a lot more people in that, so I'm glad you corrected that, but I think where some of the benefit is, Australia as a nation is a great sporting nation, and when I grew up and still today, we've got a couple of codes of sport that are particularly of interest in this part of the world and in Queensland, that is football and cricket. So we'll get a fair bit of kudos out of hosting that with the state of origin stuff for the veterans that have been playing for many, many years. So the exposure the city will get as a city and as a region in the media is going to be worth many, many thousands of dollars on top of what the visitors will bring to the city with them when they come and play, or the spectators that come and watch. So I think it's a great outcome, and for a few bucks, we couldn't knock it back.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to speak? Councillor Rodda?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I agree with Councillor Webb. It's a great thing. It'll be more than 300 players. It'll be probably 300 players plus their partners and the team, associated team administration. Veterans are good spenders in local communities when they travel away. Just a few weeks ago, we had the COD hockey in Tamworth, which attracted thousands, more than 1,000 I should say, and in May we'll have the hockey 40-45s and later on the Kim Small and York Cup, all great things that will enhance the local economy and also help local accommodation outlets sort of recover from the COVID pandemic economic downturn. So I think for a small investment, we'll get a good return for our community.
Thank you. Councillor Betts?
Yeah, thanks, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Totally agree with the two previous speakers. I've attended this event on a face-to-face to give support to this event. And one of the things that I've taken away from these last two events, and I think Councillor Wilson might back me up on this, the accolades that the council and the community got from the sporting facilities that we had available to us, or to them, and that went away. And the feedback that I got subsequent to that has been quite astounding, actually, and it does promote Tamworth and the region that we are a top-line regional sporting facility. So I totally support the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson?
Mr Mayor, I think that you use a biblical term. This is an example of where one event begets another event. Because I think the event you're referring to was the English veterans team came and played here. They've gone right around Australia, Perth, Adelaide, Melbourne, whatever. The place they most enjoyed playing was here. They had a fantastic time, and I think because of the profile that happened, not only because of the cricket and the venues, but because of the hospitality and the veterans here, it was just superb. They couldn't wait. I can't wait to come back, to be honest. And this is an example, probably for all our sports. We run a good event like the PWSA sporting, then they beget whatever the term is, other events. And that's why it's so important we take opportunities to do what we do, what events we can, and to do them well. So, great example.
Thank you. Any further comments, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The motion is carried. And item 4, and once again we've unfortunately misnamed the Rotary Club in this report, and it should refer to the Rotary Club of Tamworth First Light. So who has a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Embry and Councillor Rodda. Councillor Embry, do you wish to speak to the motion? No. Any councillors wish to speak against? If not, any councillors wish to make comment? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The motion is carried. That brings us to item 10.1.
Mr. Could I just make an amendment to that?
Councillor Tickle, yes.
Amending the motion so much as to say, suggestion that part 1 waiving of the fee stays as is, because that will come out of the waiving of fee budget, but part 2 be referred to the annual donations committee for consideration. I can move an amendment if you'd like, or just.
Yeah, I think that would need to be an amendment to the motion, so that, and that's pretty simple, that,
The motion hasn't been moved, Mr Mayor, so councillor Tickle's just moving that, that can be the motion.
yes. And that recurring budget be established subject to, agreement from the committee. Is that what you're in?
It needs to be referred to the committee for consideration along with all our other requests that we receive every year.
Yep.
So I think it needs further consideration and by the committee.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second that, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Tickle, so the words I think we'll just put in dot point 2 is request the annual donations committee consider
Yeah.
a recurring budget.
Okay, so we've got a mover and a seconder. Councillor Tickle, do you wish to speak to the motion? Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment? If not, Councillor Wilson.
I'll just make a brief comment. The intent of the committee is to facilitate usually one-off needs for community groups, and so it's good to make sure that that's the primary function of that donations committee.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to make comment? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Motion is carried. And now, before I move in, ask for a mover to bring items 11.1 and 2 to close council for consideration. Could I make an offer to any of those members of the public who wish to have any matters brought before open council? If not, thank you, members of the media, for your interest and attention. And Councillor Impey, would you mind?
No.
So councillors, could I have a motion now to move into closed council to have items 11.1 and 2? Move Councillor Inglis and Councillor Betts.
Oh, it's only 7:25.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Council, this is a report from the closed session of the Ordinary Council meeting on the 9th of March 2021. Considered 2 items in closed council, that is 12.1 to 12.2. In both of those items, the recommendations were accepted as per the business paper.
So a motion to accept, Councillor Maxwell and Councillor Enby, those in favour, against, carried. That brings our meeting formally to a close. I think, General